The Streets, Traffic, and Refuse Committee will be called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Murphy. Here. Alderman Kotar.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley.
Here.
Alderwoman Martin. Chairman Boyd.
Present.
4 present, you have a quorum.
Boyd's here.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
I saw her.
Okay. So, Valerie, can you go grab Alderman Boyd? Maybe she didn't hear that now. Okay, the first board bill up is Board Bill 203, sponsored by the chairman. We have John Kohler from BPS to walk us through the board bill.
Thank you
morning,
very
John.
much. Good morning. How's everybody today?
Good day to be here.
And most of you know me. I do see a new face that I've not yet met. I'm John Kohler. I work for the Board of Public Service in the Planning and Programming Division under Rich Bradley, the president of BPS. Over the past 2 years, the city has pursued federally funded projects, and what I've done this time is combine 7 of our upcoming federal transportation improvement program projects. And these are projects that the city has been awarded through competitive development of applications, and they're different pots of money administered through East West Gateway Council of Governments. And the pots of money are tied to surface transportation, sub-allocated funding, congestion mitigation, air quality, transportation alternative program funding, and some bridge maintenance funding. And I have distributed a packet that shows the big sheet is all 7 of the projects where they're located in the city. And then I've also included individual sheets for each project that I'll go into a little bit more detail. But essentially, the board bill provides a mechanism for the Board of Aldermen to authorize the Board of Public Service to enter into contracts with MoDOT, with the designers, with contractors, MSD, utilities, any other organization that we would need to execute an official document. And you're giving the Board of Public Service that authority. So we'll go ahead, and maybe the best approach would be I'll present each project and then address any comments you might have on that project.
Sure.
So the first one is the Louisiana Count Street project. This is a project that initiated with TrailNet probably about 2.5 years ago. It's a pilot Count Streets project, and the pilot section is about a mile from Merrimack to Gravois. The original stretch was going to run all the way from Coronelette Park just north of Tower Grove Park on Shenandoah. But it was too long of a 3.6 mile stretch to pursue federal funding, so we pared it down to we believe hit several significant areas. 2 business districts, the Dutchtown and the Cherokee business districts. It hit 2 major parks, Marquette Park, Gravois Park, and it touched Gravois Avenue, which recently bike lanes put on that, and it also crosses several bike St. Louis routes. The pilot project is Count Street, so what we are proposing to do on that stretch of Louisiana is to build traffic circles, speed humps, bump outs, and possibly look at removal of stop signs to encourage the street to function as a multimodal transportation with cars traveling at the same speed as bicycles, yet safe passage for pedestrians to cross into the neighboring parks. And the estimated construction's about $1 million. We are under advertisement to hire a designer, which will begin this year. with construction anticipated in 2020. And with that, that's the overall summary. Typically, we would implement these on lower volume streets with the goal of providing these features that reduce speeds to 20 miles an hour or less.
John, we're gonna go through all of them then.
That'd be
Make
fine.
Make their notes, but I do wanna make an announcement. Board Bill 216 is not being heard in this committee. It was put in the wrong committee to be heard. So if anybody's here about Board Bill 216, it would not be heard in the Streets Committee. Go ahead, John.
Second project is a project sponsored by Alderman Moore, Dr. Martin Luther King Lighting and Signal Interconnect from Newstead to Vandeventer. This project stretch has been addressed already by MoDOT because it is a MoDOT road. They've done various curb ramp upgrades. We're going to enhance that recent improvement to provide decorative lighting and then traffic flow improvements to upgrade our signalization and provide some interconnect. The cost of this project's about $1.6 million, and we're also beginning design this year with construction in 2019. The third project's a partnership with SLDC and involves a section of roadway on Hall Street, which is the southern end of Hall Street between East Grand and Adelaide. As some of you may know, this road is plagued with drainage problems. It's very flat. We've got flooding issues during stormwater events. Trucks have difficulty riding through the ponds, and it is a major arterial with significant truck routes. So we plan on this project to fully reconstruct those blocks of Hall Street and reconfigure the lanes and partner with MSD to build bioswales to contain stormwater, reduce the amount of runoff, and reduce the quantity of runoff as well. And through that partnership, MSD is providing the local match to support the project. The next project is a smaller bridge in Alderman Williamson's ward. This is the Hamilton Bridge over Metrolink, just north of Forest Park. It is in very poor shape. Structural sufficiency is low, and it is fully eligible for replacement. It's about a $2 million construction cost with construction anticipated in 2020. The Compton Bridge project, this is a stretch of bridge over the Mill Creek Rail Yard. The project limits are Shoto on the south all the way to I-64 on the north. The bridge is also structurally deficient. If anybody has ridden on that lately, it's plagued with some significant potholing, and the railing is in poor shape, and it's very long. What we are anticipating doing is cutting the length of the bridge from 1,350 feet to 450 feet and build vertical earth walls to minimize the amount of bridge length. We only have funded currently with the application we submitted for design and right-of-way. We do plan to submit a subsequent construction funding in the future. But that anticipated construction cost is about $12 million in the future. And that's why this is anticipated further out in 2021, because we will need to pursue that additional funding. But we are looking at lane modifications to potentially go with 2 northbound, 1 southbound, and the possibility of separated bike facilities to tie into Great Rivers Greenway, recent Shoto Greenway initiative, and TrailNet's Vision project. to provide a full network of potential separated bike facilities. The next project is 7th Street. Alderman Kotar is involved with working with the developers, primarily Spinnaker is a partner in developing 7th Street from Washington to Ballpark Village. And this, we pursued 2 pots of funding, both STPS and CMAQ. And the estimated cost is about $3 million. We're looking at providing enhanced pedestrian corridor, bump outs, new sidewalk, enhanced pedestrian lighting, similar to what you've seen on Washington Street recently from 7th to Memorial, some signal improvements, other landscaping, and then some complementary bicycling and transit improvements. And we anticipate this will start about 2020. And then lastly, our 7th project is partnership with Project Connect and SLDC for improving Jefferson traffic signalization and upgrading our signal components all the way from Market to Natural Bridge on the south, which runs alongside the NGA facility. We're looking at new traffic signal equipment. We're trying to improve traffic flow so that this is also tied into 64 Jefferson Interchange project that the city's partnering with MoDOT. We want to continue that traffic flow, improve corridor all the way beyond through the NGA site and beyond. Looking at new curb ramps, bump outs as well. And that cost is about $2.7 million for construction. With that, I'd like to open it up for any questions or comments.
Sure. Thank you, John. We'll go ahead and open it up for questions by members of the committee. Alderwoman Murphy.
I'm most familiar with the Louisiana one because we actually, rode that one that time and then decided what areas to do it. So that funding has been secured?
Yes, it has.
Okay. And I guess on all of these, we're looking, it's looking like the funding will be secured or has been secured.
That's correct. We have typically, at minimum, these federal projects require a 20% local match.
Right.
And for us to even submit an application, we solidify that local match and make sure that we've got firm written commitments to pursue these projects. So in this case, we had 3 aldermen provide or commit to 1 half-cent ward, alderman funding. Alderman Guenther is here. Alderman Combe provided some. And Alderman Spencer provided the lion's share because it's a majority of her ward.
That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Kotar.
No questions. John, thanks for your work on all these projects. I know we've worked closely for a number of years on 7th Street. Excited to see this off the ground and all these other projects. And hopefully we can secure the funding for that Compton Street Bridge. When you said it's $12 million, is that on top of whoever we're allocating for design? So the money in here is just design. Is it $12 million on top of that for construction?
That's correct.
Okay.
So this board bill is authorizing the design and right-of-way, and that is $2.5 million for both of those elements. The 12 would be an addition in the future for the estimated construction.
Got it.
Now, we'll hone in on that number as we get into the design to see if that goes up or down, depending upon how that design proceeds.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Bosley.
No questions at this time. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm looking forward to the upgrades here on Jefferson to Natural Bridge. We got a lot of potholes that stretches.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely in need of some upgrades, so definitely looking forward to seeing it.
Great. Thank you.
So John, I have a few questions. So on Hall Street, that's a street that's known for drag racing, It's a lot of issues and problems. Have you looked at any traffic calming opportunities during this reconstruction from East Grand to Adelaide?
So, one inherent traffic calming that will come out of this project, right now it's 4 lanes of traffic, 2 in each direction. We've done enough traffic preliminary analysis to determine that we want to incorporate a lane reduction. So now we're proposing a shared middle lane with 1 lane in each direction. And so that whole pavement width's coming way down from what you see out there now.
Okay. Thank you. The Martin Luther King project. Tell me again about the lighting, because I know at Sarah and Martin Luther King, there were lights, but now there are stop signs. There was kind of a double stop at one point. Will you continue to remove that signal light? Or are you adding a signal light that's going to function better with new lighting, the timing system?
We are upgrading the signalization. I believe at that intersection, we're proposing to maintain the stop sign that's out there now and potentially take that out. That'll come out through, the signal, the old signal system.
Okay.
But that'll be solidified as we get into design and work with the traffic division and traffic flow and the whole, this is a congestion mitigation project, so we're awarded money based on the premise we're improving air quality. So by connecting the signals and improving the amount of time that people have to stop and the frequency, that's what the goal of the project is.
Right. Let me ask you this. So at that intersection, so it's kind of like a triangle, right? And I know Alderman Moore, I wish he was here. The city put those concrete barriers there, and it's kind of unattractive. Is closing that off and making that more attractive part of this, or is that something outside the scope of what could have been done? Because, theoretically, traffic could have gone through there.
Yeah, sure. I know they've got that slip type, I'll call it a ramp, but it is an odd configuration, and I know that that's been up for discussion. We haven't specifically called it out in the application, but it's something that as we lay out the design, if that's a desire to permanently eliminate that or modify it in some way, that's something that certainly could be addressed with this project.
Good. Okay. The Compton Bridge, I just want to make sure I'm clear, because we're going from 1,250 feet to 450 feet. And tell me again how we're doing that.
So
How's that possible?
the bridge, so I think I've got a picture in here. Let's see. If
Right, I see it going over the railroad
Yeah, that's all,
tracks.
yeah.
Okay.
That's how they're doing it.
So this is a view, I believe, looking south. So if you can imagine the forefront of that picture, if you extend looking to the north, that bridge keeps going nearly to I-64.
Right.
Along the bi-state facility, and there's a big parking lot on one side. At one point, there was potentially active rail lines in there. Over time, those rails have been taken out and are non-functioning and no longer needed. The dynamic of rail shipping in St. Louis has changed over time. So if there's no interest in future rail lines, there's no reason to build a bridge structure over an unused facility. So the idea would be, what used to be a reason to have that through underpass no longer exists, and we're gonna eliminate that.
So you're gonna go straight across, basically.
Correct.
Instead
Well,
of going up and over.
it'll still be high, but we'll build these walls filled in with earth rather than a bridge structure. But it'll be elevated and come down to meet I-64 at Spruce. It'll still be an elevated road, but not a bridge structure. It'll be on an earthen embankment with walls on each side.
Okay, let me just make sure I'm clear. So, are we reducing it from here to here, or the length of it?
The length of it.
It is the length.
The height will stay predominantly the same over the railroad. And where it stands now, the roadway elevation will be very similar to what you see now. But it's such a long bridge, we don't need it to bridge over things that aren't there anymore.
But then how do you keep the connection if you shorten the bridge? I'm just trying to think too logical like
Put
that.
earth underneath it.
Yeah, we'll fill up that bridge
Oh,
with
and just
earth.
have a road.
Yeah.
So gotcha. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, so it transitions from that long bridge to just going straight over a street.
Yes.
Gotcha, okay.
And
now-
that reduces our future maintenance and,
Sure. Okay. I think that's some of the questions that I have. Alderwoman Ingrassia, do you have any questions?
I think I'm supposed to be a co-sponsor on this, so if you wouldn't mind adding me, that'd be great. 2 of the projects in the 6th Ward, thanks. And I'm curious on the Hall Street project, how you picked the area, like what is happening with Adelaide to Riverview or Riverview to the city limits?
so this
Those
is
are
a
so
phased
dangerous.
project and
Okay.
very expensive. The initial cost was about $30 million to go from East Grand to Riverview, that whole piece. We recognize that MSD has a vested interest in improving drainage because it falls within their jurisdiction. And MoDOT maintains the section of Hall Street from Adelaide to Riverview. That actually turns into a MoDOT numbered facility.
Is Riverview MoDOT maintained?
Yes, it is.
Okay, have you talked to them about, I mean,
So,
drainage is obviously an issue, but, I mean, people get in accidents and
and-
killed there.
yeah, so
Regularly.
Riverview is a
Yeah.
concern and a liability for maintenance as well. So the second phase of this, and we've been actively discussing with both MSD and MoDOT, how do we go from Adelaide to Riverview? So they've got, MSD has funding, several millions of dollars of funding to improve that stretch, and MoDOT has earmarked several millions of dollars to do that second phase.
Okay,
So because this piece that we started is off the MoDOT system, and there's industries that we're working with to improve their access, that's why we chose that first phase being East Grand and
okay,
Adelaide.
thank you.
Okay, Alderman Oldenburg, do you have any questions? Alderman Gunther?
No question.
Okay. We do have someone sign up to speak, Lisa, is it Farr?
Far.
Huh?
That's not for this bill, though.
It's for the,
The-
potentially bike share if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, you signed up on 203.
Oh.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
we
just
didn't
signed the
realize
paper
that.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 203 out of committee with due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderman Kotar,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
5 aye votes, do pass.
Okay, next Board Bill up is Board Bill 215, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you.
I would have taken you next, Alderman Oldenburg, with more seniority, but I think this will be a quickie.
I'm happy to yield to the ranking member, Ogilvie. This is groundbreaking legislation here, Alderman.
You talked to one of your constituents about this.
You did?
I did.
You pass those on down to
Alderman Oldenburg, is this your first piece of legislation?
By God, it is.
It is
Groundbreaking legislation at that.
We haven't passed it yet.
Let me clap.
Just hold on.
Oh, my.
You're sweet to ask, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
This seems like big government.
All right, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Board Bill 215 is the introduction of pretty straightforward stop sign, a three-way stop. If you look, I'm sorry, it's a little small, the print there, but the Google map I put a circle around the intersection. The intersection in question is at Childress and Devonshire. If you are heading southbound or north, Childress is the north-southbound street there, and Devonshire is a one-way heading west. And if you go up to Lansdowne, that there is no stop signage there. There is at Sutherland and Childress in the far portion of that map. So the concern has become among residents there, along with, if you look down in the kind of southeast portion, you see the red roof compilation of buildings there. That's St. Gabriel's Church and School. So a few months back, there's been some concerns with walk routes, children's walk routes to school that come through this intersection. And there's only one stop sign heading west on Devonshire. And there were a few close calls when school had started in the fall with some children walking. I think about a year ago there was a real bad collision, a T-bone at that intersection. I did confer with the traffic commissioner and the streets department, and the data was insufficient in their mind to put a stop sign there, which I think you're all familiar with this narrative. And I tend to always want to make data-driven decisions. In this case, though, given all the calls I've had from residents and the meetings I had at the 63 and the 6400 block of Devonshire, and the overwhelming support that the residents have had to want to put some stop signs at northbound and southbound Childress for the protection of the school routes and the walking, I decided to acquiesce and introduce this board bill on their behalf. So I will entertain any questions.
Okay, Alderwoman Murphy.
No questions. Looks fine.
Alderman Coulter.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley.
Is it in your ward?
Indeed it is, sir. Thank you.
No questions.
Alderwoman Martin.
No questions.
Okay. Out of curiosity, did you consider any other traffic calming opportunities versus the
Yeah.
stop sign?
We thought about potentially, could you move cars to restrict parking to just the west side of Childress? Would that view any kind of view sheds or impediments that existed there? We looked at that. We looked at maybe limiting parking, but I think the residents' concern was it's not necessarily a sightline problem, but the fact that people start ramping up when they're heading southbound mostly, from given there's no stop sign or at the intersection of Lansdowne, and then they continue to roll through. So we looked at maybe looking at that. I thought that was more complicated to try to restrict parking and would be harder to enforce than a stop sign.
Is there parking on Childress?
There is on both sides, the west and east side.
And it's a single lane, or it's 2 lanes but single, right?
Yeah, I mean it's tight.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 215 out of committee with due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second.
Previous roll.
Hearing no, she voted.
Oh, okay.
Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill 215 comes out of committee with due pass recommendation.
Thank you, folks.
Make
Yeah,
sure you frame this one.
you're all very sweet.
Congratulations.
All right.
It's not over with yet. We gotta get past that being board.
Right.
That's true.
No,
15 votes.
Right. We don't mind.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Yes, sir.
remember 15.
15.
15.
On the floor, he
Pass.
Got it.
One more hurdle.
You better start talking to him.
Understood. I thought the chairman helps me out with those votes.
I'll do my part. Okay, the next board bill is Board Bill 218, sponsored by our esteemed alderman from the 24th Ward, Scott Ogilvie.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Bill 218 deals with establishing a permitting process for bike share operators within the city. So I want to talk a little bit about bike share, a little bit about what would be in the permit, what will be in the permit, and a little bit about how we hope to finally get a bike share system in St. Louis. So brief background on bike share. Today there are about 60 cities in the United States that have bike share systems. There was something like 30 million rides taken across those systems last year. And there are also dozens of smaller systems in addition to those 60 municipal systems at college campuses and some corporate campuses. So in the last 8 or so years, bike share has really expanded very rapidly across the country. And St. Louis is one of the largest markets in the country that does not have a bike share system today. And I think over time, it's because it's become something that some people expect to see in a city as an additional mode of transportation, something that's convenient, something that helps people on their daily commute, or something that tourists can use to see a city when they are visiting. I'm not going to go into too much background on St. Louis's efforts to get a bike share system in the past. Liza is going to go through some of that. She's with Bi-State, and she's worked directly on some of those, so I'll let her do some of that background. But the region has tried to get a system. We have not gotten a system to date. We have looked previously at what you call a dock system, which has stations. Those systems tend to be somewhat expensive, and they frequently require a city or county to buy the system up front and to own part of the system going forward. Then you have an operator that runs the system. So we haven't been successful in getting funding for one of those systems. The technology in recent years has changed somewhat, and there are now a number of what are called dockless bike systems, which do not require the stations, where you can pay at the bike. You find the bikes not based on where the station is, but based on a smartphone application that shows you where the bikes are. You go find the bike, pay at the bike, and then you can check out the bike, basically. So this permit system sort of, and there are several companies now that operate dockless bike share systems in the U.S., and this permit would sort of contemplates that some of those companies, 1, 2, we don't know how many, would apply for the permit in order to get the permit to operate the systems in St. Louis. This permit process would not require the city to buy or purchase or maintain a system. There would be no cost to the city through one of these dockless bike share companies. In fact, they would pay us the permit fee each year in order to operate the system. So that's a big distinction from what we've been trying to do in the past, where we were going to have to spend a somewhat substantial amount of money to get a system. Now we're looking at a model where there's no cost to the city, and we're just issuing a permit to a company that would operate the system. So the bill is very short. The permit is somewhat longer. Oh, I have this here. This is a letter from Greensboro, North Carolina, which recently implemented a dockless bike share system similar to what we're contemplating. The permit is somewhat longer. I have what amounts to a draft permit that BPS has developed. So the bill says that BPS is authorized to develop a permitting process, and the streets department would issue the permits. We have a draft permit, and it includes a lot of detail on how a dockless bike share operator would have to operate, a lot of rules and regulations they'd have to follow. It requires it requires local staff to make sure that the system is maintained properly and that issues can be dealt with. We want to make sure that if there are problems, people are calling that company, not calling CSB and expecting to, have their problem fixed. And it requires, there's an equity factor within the permit that means bikes every day, a certain percentage of bikes within the system have to be distributed to lower income areas of St. Louis, north and south, primarily in relation to distance from Metrolink stations. So you look at bike share as a enhancement to public transit. It's a way that you can take it to a Metrolink station, or if you get off Metrolink, you could ride it, from the Metrolink station to your destination. So we're looking at making sure, we want to make sure we're not just serving the central corridor with a bike share system, but that we're getting bikes distributed to more of the city. And that will be easier as the system grows and as a company got more bikes on the ground. It gets, I think, easier to make sure there are bikes, not just in sort of not just around like Forest Park, for instance, but where more residents can use them. That's kind of an overview. I don't know if, did you want to contribute anything, Todd?
You summed it up pretty good. We support the idea. It's good at work. 20 years in street department, and they got a neat program here.
Okay,
It's hard for me to
just
say.
a moment. Ty, why don't you take a seat real quick? And you can tell everybody who you are so people that don't know you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Director of Operations for Mayor Cruzen. As the Alderman mentioned, I've had a lot of experience, street guy for 20 years, so I work closely on helping them draft this. I think this is a neat plan. By allowing BPS to set the rules, it'll allow us to adapt the rules as necessary. This is a new program, so we can address any issues we come up with. Concerns are, where do people leave the bikes? Are they gonna be blocking a restaurant, with their food? Are they gonna be blocking ADA access? And I believe these rules are there, and it's simple. And if somebody goes gafunk, I send a truck out, we load all the bikes up, we put them in a yard, they're gone. Okay, we got a lot of stick on this, we can control this operation. So I'm a big believer in it. Okay? It's a zero cost thing. We'll make a little money on it, permits, we'll control it, people have fun. And the equity part is freaking huge. We look for equity in a lot of things we do, and it's there, and it'll work. So, thanks.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and hear from Ms. Lisa before we take questions from the committee?
Sure. You want me to move, or
If
you want Todd
She
to
could
move?
replace Todd. Sit right there next to Todd.
I'd love to replace Todd.
I can play this back.
That's on the record.
So,
Go ahead, introduce yourself to the committee.
I'm Liza Farr, I'm with Bi-State Development, in the Economic Development Department.
Okay.
So I can just give a little background on where we came on bike share, just to give you an idea of why we ended up here. This all started back in 2014, when a lot of cities started looking into bike share. The very first system of bike share ever really started in 2010, so it's all relatively a new thing in America. In 2014, Great Rivers Greenway commissioned a feasibility study to see if bike share would be successful in St. Louis. And to be clear, that was focused on this sort of dock-based system that Scott was speaking about earlier, where you can actually walk up to a station in a certain location. That study found that it would be great in St. Louis, it would be successful, but at the time, no one entity or agency wanted to take it on, particularly because of the cost that we were talking about. So it sort of lay dormant until Bi-State picked it up in 2017, just at the beginning, about a year ago. And we started looking at it with the help of a bike share working group that included stakeholders from all sorts of different entities, public, private, and nonprofit. And we started pursuing the Transportation Alternatives Program grant that East West Gateway puts out from the Federal Highway Administration. Around the same time that we did not get that grant to buy the bikes, the dockless bike share technology also came onto the scene, so it ended up being a pretty nice nudge to go in that direction. So with the working group, we sort of examined the dockless bike share option through talking to cities nationwide that have been adopting it, as well as the companies themselves, trying to learn from their best practices and experiences. And we sort of decided that this could be a good option for St. Louis, and then we sort of started working with the city streets department and sort of handed it from by state to the streets department and Board of Public Service, as of course the city is the one that actually needs to permit the right of way itself. So that's where we ended up here, and I've been sort of staying on to help guide the process just because I've been working on this for a while. So, yeah. Anything else you want me to mention?
I guess one thing I didn't mention that you touched on is that the information in the permit, the requirements in the permit are based on that 2014 study by Great Rivers Greenway. So there's sort of the local aspect. And it's based on the permit process that other cities across the country have implemented. So I feel like as a first foray into permitting this, we have a lot of both local information and criteria within the permit and things that other cities have learned when doing this. So I feel like it's a pretty, as a first go, I think it's a pretty solid, comprehensive permit.
Okay, let's go ahead and take questions from the committee. Alderwoman Murphy.
Yeah, no, it sounds wonderful. I'm familiar with those big stations in other cities. I've been there. So now when we say dockless, obviously we're not going to lean them against the side of a building. So the company is going to provide some sort of place where they get locked. So that's my question. What does that look like and where will those be?
Sure. So the bikes, there's several companies that do this.
Okay.
What's pretty common among them though is that the rear wheel kind of locks itself when the bike is not in use. And when you purchase a ride, the rear wheel is unlocked. All the bikes have a kickstand. The bikes can be left basically anywhere you would leave your own bike if you were riding around and needed to lock it up to go somewhere. So they will be, ideally they are not left in places that block a sidewalk, places that block the door. If they do, if somebody left it in a bad spot, like it's right in front of the door to your restaurant, you can pick up the bike and move it a couple feet. Yeah. There is also the option, sort of technology permits this, and the permit process allows the city to create areas with what's called like a geo fence, like a zone where we would prefer the bikes be left. And so we might, kind of have to see how it goes, but you could envision that there might be spots where you really want bikes available at all times. So it might be the visitor center at Forest Park, it might be an area near the Arch, it might be City Hall. We might always want, a few bikes outside the front door of City Hall. It might be near a Metrolink station, where maybe if the rider then leaves the bike kind of in the right spot, they get a discount or something like that. So I think that would be worked out with an operator. But in general, I think that riders kind of get the hang of where a good place to leave the bike is. And if it's left in a bad spot, within the permit it says you got to have a local phone number. People have to be able to call the local staff on site. If it's left in a bad spot during the week, the permit says it needs to be moved within 2 hours. So the bike share company itself has to take that responsibility to get it out of the way if it's if somebody is careless and leaves it on the stairs down to the Metrolink station.
Okay, so the security is enough that they're not worried about bikes being stolen and hacked into and stuff like that?
Well, they all have GPS on them. So if somebody, they're not great bikes to, who knows, maybe a bike will get stolen. They're not great bikes to steal because the rear wheel locks and they have GPS. So if you steal it, it's still very easy for the company to find where the bike is. Yeah.
No more questions, thank you.
Alderman Kohler.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley.
No question.
Alderman Martin.
No questions.
Wow.
Sounds like
Okay. I have a few questions. It's just kind of like almost sounds too good to be true type scenario.
Yeah, that's
Seems it's one page,
Yeah.
and so here are a few of the questions. I'm gonna start off number one. Why is Bi-State interested in this, Lisa?
Bi-State got interested basically when I came on the scene, and a lot of people I was working with were saying that this is a really important transportation option that we don't have. our CEO always says, we're in the business of moving people, right? So we really are thinking about not just trains and buses, but, you know, mobility as a whole throughout the city. So that's really why we got on the scene. And that's sort of informed where these neighborhoods, the low-income neighborhoods, where they're going to be required to keep bikes in. That's why we wanted to make sure we chose those neighborhoods that had a first mile or last mile gap from MetroLink, that often meant for, you know, long transfers or having to walk, you know, 40 minutes just to get to a train or bus stop. So for us, it is really, really key to be able to make those connections into our system, as well as just improve mobility and make it easier for anyone to not have to own a car, or if they don't own a car, make it easier for them to access job opportunities and things like that.
And so, once you handed this, kind of, after you did your due diligence and kind of handed it off to the city, now Metro is out of it? Or is there a
Yeah.
future role, or?
I'm just here to help. I'm not in a formal capacity. I will say though,
Oh, okay.
the one thing that we are still looking at By State is we are going to apply for a grant program that is specifically focused on social equity and inclusion in bike share programs. It's out of Philadelphia, and we're applying for a $73,000 grant that will allow us to do a engagement and education program in those neighborhoods that we're targeting. So it will empower a resident in each of these areas to actually do engagement and education with some resources and help from us, to basically spread the word about bike sharing and get folks that maybe haven't ridden a bike in 20 years to, you know how to do it safely in traffic, know how to use bike share, know how to use the low-income subsidies and things like that. So that's one way that By State is still sort of involved, but not directly in the program itself.
Okay. My question is, how will we know how many bikes are in the system, you know, so that there isn't a disparity on, they're all predominantly in the situation and none are on the north side or the south side in different neighborhoods?
So within the permit process, the permit establishes the number of bikes that the operator can deploy. It makes them sort of ramp it up month by month so we can kind of get a feel for how things are working before there's, you know, a ton of bikes. And it requires them to share with us all their location data on where the bikes are. And so the permit is very specific that every day at least 20% of those bikes have to be in these designated areas. And not just that, but within those areas, each sort of neighborhood within those areas needs to have a certain percentage of those bikes to ensure that there is equitable distribution. And they have to share all that data. I mean, they have all that data because they know where every bike is at all times because of the GPS. So they have to share that with us to kind of prove that they're doing what the permit says they need to do. And the permit also allows for us to terminate the permit and say you can't operate if they're not following the rules that are within the permit. So I think we'll have the information we need to ensure they're doing what we want them to do. And I think the good thing about BPS authorizing the permit is that we can tweak this in the future. So after a year, if there's something we think we want to change, something we think we can make better by changing some of the rules in the permit, we'll have the opportunity to do that.
So, who's getting this data on the city side and how often?
I'll have to refer to the permit for a second. Give me a second. Yeah, I mean, the permit says the city. I would assume that they'll probably transmit that data to the streets department since the streets department issues the permit. But I think we could just tell them where.
Each user will be able to get on there and see where they're at so they can find them, right?
Yes, but Chairman's asking, how do we know the company's doing what we want them to do? I think we can specify who we want that information to be transmitted to within city government.
But the responsible department to manage the operation will be the streets department.
Right.
So someone of the streets department.
Right. So it's gonna require some manpower on the city side. So where I'm going with this is, what is it gonna cost the city? You know, how often is this person gonna do this monitoring? Is it a daily activity? Is it a weekly activity? Is it a monthly activity? I mean, how do we, you know, test the fidelity of the process?
I can speak
How much
to
manpower
that
is that
from
gonna
other
require?
cities if you want.
Sure, we'll both answer. I'll just say, so the permit fee hopefully should, there might be some incremental, sort of marginal, I hope minimal cost to the city to sort of administer this. You know, just like there's some minimal cost to the city to have food trucks, because
Sure.
there's gotta be inspections by the fire department, et cetera. Hopefully the permit fee covers that. The permit fee is written as a per bike permit fee, so
How
it's
much is that, by the way?
$10 per bike per year.
Okay.
Plus like a flat, like a $500 fee and then 10 bikes per. So if they have a lot of bikes, there's more permit revenue to cover that cost. And I think Liza wanted to mention how other cities are doing
Yeah,
this.
I just want to mention, we based that fee off of other cities that already have existing programs, and we talked to these cities and said, you know, is this covering your cost? And the answer was yes. It doesn't require a ton of manpower at the actual city, because it requires the companies themselves to do all of the marketing, all of the outreach. The data just comes in, which pretty much shows, you know, the enforcement. We don't have to send people out to go count the number of bikes in
Right.
certain neighborhoods, right? So they're required to do all of that. They're required to take the maintenance requests and the customer service and everything. So the city's really, their role is just sort of incidental stuff that comes along the way. We're still, you know, gonna have a couple people call the city instead of the, you know, and you have to forward it on. But other cities have found that it has not added to their cost, and if anything, this fee allows some wiggle room for the city to maybe use that money to put in bike corrals or something like that, to add to the bike parking, if there is money left over that wasn't used during staff time.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the operators. So, is there an RFP process? People compete? How many operators are out there? Is this a sole source opportunity? Talk to me about that.
So this is not. So I would compare this to something like, I think food trucks are a good comparison.
Okay.
So there can be any number of food truck operators that want to do it, right? They have to meet the permit requirements to operate a food truck, which are some safety requirements. I think there's some location things that can't be everywhere. There's probably hours of operation, those kind of things. But we don't limit the number of food truck operators that can be out there, and we don't require an RFP. We don't pick which food truck operators there are, because they mostly operate, you know, just on the street. I think this is comparable. There are about four or five companies in the United States that are in this business. This permit doesn't say that we're limited to one. It says however many of those companies can meet the requirements in the permit can operate. So this is not designed for one company or to only allow one company to operate. Right now we've got 0.
Right.
We'd like at least one. If we ended up with, you know, 2 or 3 who were trying to operate, that's fine, and the permit allows that. I think it's probably, and there are some markets where there are multiple bike share operators now. So it's possible. I don't know that we'll have multiple, but we're certainly allowing for that if more than one company wants to operate here.
Out of curiosity, do we know if a company right now that's interested and we just don't have the platform for them?
Yes.
Policy in place?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. The only thing, and I'll go back for questions from other committee members, the only thing I'm challenged with right now is I need to look at the draft policy. I want to make sure I understand clearly the whole process, because that's important to me. So I'm definitely for it and doing it, but I just want to make sure I've internalized that we're doing this the right way, and that I'm clearly, you know, understand what is the cost to the city. Matter of fact, have anybody looked at, as far as revenue generation, how much potentially that we can generate on an annual basis with the permit fees?
Well,
Not that that's a big issue,
Yeah.
because it's a no cost, allegedly a no cost.
I don't think so when you have a permit fee, Missouri law limits you to only covering your costs with the permit. I don't think the idea is that we're going to generate a ton of revenue. The idea, though, is to minimize the cost to the city. It's to have an additional service out there
Right.
with no or a minimal cost to the city, and hopefully the permit fee then covers that cost. So, I mean, if you have a bike share company that's got, 2,500 bikes out there, that's $25,000. It's not a lot of money, but it is an amenity then to the people using it.
I'd be curious if someone had that data though. If you think the first 12 months, it would be 2,500 bikes out, on the street.
Yeah, I think in the first year you could get 2,500 bikes. Yep.
Okay. Any additional questions from members of the committee? Alderwoman Murphy?
Yeah, I did, this is just, I'm not asking for myself, but are all these bikes gonna be two wheels? Or are we looking in the future to having those tricycle bikes? You know what I've seen.
Cooler.
I've seen
our
older
aging
people
population.
ride those tricycles with the baskets on,
You have to do the
Would
flat,
those be
like-
available at some point? Or are they all just the two wheels?
What about the bar cycle? That'll be-
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one too.
That
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be good.
Yeah. But, are they just two wheels?
Yeah, I think that most of the bikes will have two wheels. I think that there are, electric bikes are creeping into the bicycle market in general, and I think some companies may want to deploy some number of electric bikes. Those are a lot more expensive, so I doubt that that'll ever be like a big share of the fleet, but those might be in the mix at some point. Yeah.
I was referring to those, I call them the tricycle bikes, those adult tricycles, what
Yeah.
they look like, and they got because I can envision older people using those, or people with slight disabilities being able to use that. That's what I've seen on the bike trails. and
Yes.
that.
You are getting into it, so that the trick then is you're getting into like a very, very small slice of the
yeah.
overall market, and how does that bike be in the right spot for the right person? So,
Sure.
yeah.
I will say during our bike share working group over the last year, we had quite a few members that were representing nonprofits of people with disabilities and
Yeah,
aging populations. So it's been a conversation, but yeah, like Scott said, it's just a small portion of the market. But if there's demand for it, and we ask these companies, you never know. Like I said, they're very new and they're still, expanding their fleets and types of bikes and stuff. So.
Thank you.
All right, Alderman Kohler.
No questions.
Alderwoman Boyd, I'll come back to you last. I know you just kind of got here, but Alderman Bosley,
Don't have any questions.
Alderwoman Martin.
No questions.
So we're talking about the bike sharing program, Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
No questions? Okay. What we're gonna do, Alderman Ogilvie, is we're gonna hold this bill until next Tuesday. We will hear it next Tuesday, but I wanna get a chance to read the draft policy to see where we're going with this.
Great.
Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So the Streets, Traffic, and Refuse Committee is adjourned.
What the heck?